before attempting to read the verse and the translation and say something on Srila Prabhupada's words explaining today's verse, I would like to seek the blessings of all assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, especially our worshipable and senior most devotees present here, His Holiness Bhakti Marga Swami and His Grace Pancharatna Prabhu, Her Grace Achita Guna Mataji, and His Holiness Bhakti Saragya Gauranga Maharaj and Shivas Prabhu and all of you. Without the blessings of Vaishnavas, actually Bhagavatam won't be inclined to come out of our mouths. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in one of his commentaries, a very poetic commentary, sometimes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur composes his own verses glorifying the Bhagavatam or expressing his feelings, his heart. In one of the verses he says, self-composed verses, he says that I pray that my words become like cows that are herded by Krishna, Gopal. So may the Lord Gopal herd the cows of my words, may he milk them. So the milk extracted by Lord Gopal from the cows of my words may please and gladden the hearts of the devotees. It's a very poetic way of seeking the blessings of the devotees. But again, whenever I have an opportunity to be sitting in such an assembly of exalted devotees, I am reminded of how insignificant I am. We literally stand on the shoulders of the previous generations of devotees, especially Prabhupada's disciples, who were fortunate enough to be personally trained by Srila Prabhupada, personally guided by him. And in one way, and I apologize if my realization sounds a little bit, how would I say that, presumptuous, I guess. But in some way, our generation of devotees is more fortunate than the generation of Prabhupada's disciples, because we can receive Srila Prabhupada from them, the way they have crystallized him or distilled his presence in their hearts. Because some of the contemporaries of Srila Prabhupada, his godbrothers, and some even of his disciples were not that fortunate, because they had to rely on their own perception of Srila Prabhupada, and some of them thought that they knew better than surrendering their lives to Srila Prabhupada and went elsewhere. But when we associate and hear from and serve alongside with and under the guidance of Prabhupada's disciples, then we cannot help but get what they have made the foundation of their lives. Srila Prabhupada's persona, his character, his pastimes, and his instructions, and his presence in the hearts. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Is this better? Does it make any? Srila Prabhupada's disciples had to live through the physical departure of Prabhupada from this world, which really I cannot imagine how painful it was. But because of their mercy, we don't have to live through that, because for us Prabhupada is always present in the association of Prabhupada's disciples. And because Srila Prabhupada was and still is the Bhagavatam personified, Srila Prabhupada's disciples have that same ability. They have inherited it from Srila Prabhupada to present his mission and his teachings in a way that inspires us and gives us life. So when we hear Prabhupada's disciples, ladies and men, Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, somehow at least I get this feeling that I am in a personal, direct touch with Srila Prabhupada, and I'm not separated from him in any, even the slightest way. So with your blessings and your permission, we'll read today's verse. It's one of those verses that sometimes speakers feel a little bit uncomfortable speaking about. I know very exalted sannyasis, Prabhupada's disciples, who sometimes when they read the verse on the Bhagavatam, a particular verse, they say, well, I'd better give a class on another verse. You could call it R-rated verses, where Prabhupada doesn't shy away from speaking on topics that usually traditional sadhus prefer not to comment on. But Srila Prabhupada is the Acharya for this age. He understood and made his disciples understand that we should have a way to connect everything in this world that people see as the most important driving force in their lives in such a way that to give them an ability or capability to redirect that powerful force and make it favorable for devotional service. So I guess you've all guessed what the verse is going to be about. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayamadhirayet Nashta Prayesha Bhadrashu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtike. So this morning we are reading from the 25th chapter of the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, titled The Characteristics of King Puranjana, text 38. Kamno tvadanyam ramaye. Kamno tvadanyam ramaye. Hyarati gyam akovidam. Hyarati gyam akovidam. Asamparaya bhimukam. Asamparaya bhimukam. Ashvastana vidam pashum. Ashvastana vidam pashum. Kamno tvadanyam ramaye. Hyarati gyam akovidam. Asamparaya bhimukam. Ashvastana vidam pashum. Asamparaya vimukham Asvastana vidam pashyam. Word for word. Come unto whom? No, then. Tvat, then you. Anyam, other. Ramaye, I shall allow to enjoy. He, certainly. Arati-yam, without knowledge of sex enjoyment. Akovidam, therefore almost foolish. Asamparaya, without knowledge of the next life. Abhimukham, looking forward. Ashvastana vidam, one who does not know what is happening next. Pashum, like animals. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. How can I expect to unite with others who are neither conversant about sex nor capable of knowing how to enjoy life while living or after death? Such foolish persons are like animals because they do not know the process of sense enjoyment in this life and after death. Purport: since there are 8,400,000 species of life, there are also many different living conditions. In the lower grades of life, in plant and tree life, there is no system for sexual intercourse. In the upper grades, in the life of birds and bees, there is sex. But the insects and animals do not know how to actually enjoy sex life. In the human forms of life, however, there is full knowledge of how to enjoy sex. Indeed, there are many so-called philosophers who give directions on how to enjoy sex life. There is even a science called Kama Shastra, which is the science of sex. In human life, there are also such divisions as Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. There is no sex life except in the Grihastha or householder ashrama. The Brahmacharya is not allowed any sex. The Vanaprastha voluntarily refrains from sex, and the Sannyasi is completely renounced. The Karmis do not practice Brahmacharya, Vanaprastha, or Sannyas life, for they are very much interested in Grihastha life. In other words, a human being is very much materially inclined. Indeed, all living entities are materially inclined. They prefer Grihastha life because there is a concession for sex. The Karmis think the other statuses of life are worse than animal life, for animals also have sex, whereas the Brahmacharis, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasi completely give up sex. The Karmis therefore abhor these orders of spiritual life. Kamnu tvad anyam ramaye hyarati kyam kovidam asamparaya bhimukham ashvastana vidam pashum. How can I expect to unite with others who are neither conversant about sex nor capable of knowing how to enjoy how to enjoy life without living, while living or after death? Such foolish persons are like animals because they do not know the process of sense enjoyment in this life and after death. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakshaya Chakshun Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guruk Shri Utapadakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagat Pate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyavacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschya Dede Shatarine Mukham Karoti Vachanam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vendeshi Gurunzina Taranam. And this purport, Srila Prabhupada shows himself as he does in any other purport. He writes as a true sadhu. We know colloquially that the word sadhu is translated as someone who cuts. Well, the literal translation of what sadhu is someone who lives for the sake of eternity, for the sake of the absolute truth, which is oftentimes referred to in the Vedas and Srimad Bhagavatam as sad. So sadhu is someone who makes aspiration for eternal life his only goal in life. But also in Srimad Bhagavatam, sadhu is defined as someone who cuts. There's a verse in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam which explains that this is the obligation of a sadhu. Tato duksanga musrijya satsu sajeta buddhiman. It says here in this 11th canto, 11, 26. Santa ivasya chindanti manovya sangam uktibihi. An intelligent person should therefore reject, Krishna says in his instructions to Uddhava, an intelligent person should therefore reject all bad association and instead take up the association of saintly devotees. And the exact words Krishna uses here, he says, Santa evasya chindanti mano vyasangam uktibihi. With their sharp words, the sadhus, those who live for the sake of Sat, or Krishna, they cut off the attachments of excessive attachments of one's mind to the sense objects. You could compare it to a very expert surgeon. A surgeon is someone whose profession is to cut. But unlike a criminal with a knife in the street somewhere, the surgeon makes his incisions or her incisions minimal, and the pain caused in the process of surgery minimal, but not minimal at the cost of the patient's safety and health. He or she is supposed to cut out all unnecessary tissues or tumors or whatever else is there that prevents a person from having a healthy life. And usually they use general anesthesia, but not always. Sometimes local anesthesia, sometimes, at least in the not so distant past, surgeons used very little, if any, analgesics, and it was really very, I would say that, challenging task to operate on a person without killing him in the process by the pain alone. But Srila Prabhupada, of course, in his own way, had that ability, that mystic power to, with just a few words, cut out the attachments of his disciples from the material world. One disciple of Srila Prabhupada remembers how unfortunately I don't remember his name, maybe some of you, Pancharatna Prabhu Bhakti Marg Maharaj, might recall the name of that god brother of yours. He would come to Prabhupada to give him massage. I think it was in London. He stayed elsewhere, but regularly he would come to serve Prabhupada by massaging his body. And once he was on a train, and in the train his eyes fell upon an advertisement. And as advertisements usually do, I'm sure they do so in South Africa, as they do so in Russia and other places, they employ sex attraction to promote a certain product. Usually there is a beautiful lady or a handsome man, or both of them, enjoying life with a particular brand of product, be it a refrigerator or a car or something like that, with the idea of to instill in the minds of people that unless you buy that fridge or a car, you won't be sexually attractive to the opposite sex. So his eyes fell upon such an advertisement, and somehow it registered in his mind and evoked lusty feelings. But somehow or other he forgot about it and went on to arrive at Prabhupada's residence, and he started massaging him. And Prabhupada was silent. Usually he would chat with his servants, or at least sometimes he would chat with them. But this time he was grave and silent as he was being massaged, and all of a sudden Prabhupada told the servants, "See the scar on my back?" And he said, "Yes, Prabhupada. You know, that scar mark was caused by fire. When I was a small child, I played with matches, a matchbox. And then all of a sudden the matches were set on fire, and they also set on fire my clothes. And before I knew, I was engulfed in fire. And all of a sudden a stranger appeared, and he put out the fire and disappeared. Nobody knows who that stranger was." Saved Prabhupada, because they saved Prabhupada's life. But the burns on my back formed a scar. So that's a scar. And Prabhupada remained silent. My servant didn't know what to make of it. Okay, it's a very nice dramatic story of Prabhupada's childhood. And then Srila Prabhupada, after a few minutes of silence, said, "In the same way, if we play with matches or the fire of lust, before we know, we can be engulfed, and maybe there'll be nobody to save us." There's one devotee, a Prabhupada's disciple. He was a book distributor, and before he became a devotee, let us put it this way, he didn't live as a monk, to put it mildly. He was very prolific in the activities described here by Puranjana Maharaja's would-be consort, which in this allegorical story by Narada Muni represents the materialistic intelligence. Buddhi is feminine. So he was distributing books, and across the road from where he distributed books, he saw ladies of a certain promiscuous profession. And his pockets were full with money from book distribution. And before he knew, his mind, which is very treacherous, it cannot be trusted. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse in the 5th canto which says, "Bhratrive minam tadadabra viryam upekshya dyaditamap pramattaha guror harir charana upasanastra jahivi vikam swayam atmamoshaha." The verse says that the mind can never be trusted. The mind is compared to an uncultured man who can be befriended, he can be, you could say, brought into the trusted circle of confidence. He could be entrusted with money, but before we know, he betrays the trust and he steals the money, runs away, attacks you with a deadly weapon. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in his commentary, one of those verses in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, "Likewise the mind may pretend to be completely free from lust. He can pretend, put on an image of being completely subordinate, serene and calm and peaceful, and very friendly." And he says, in this way the mind deliberately, of course we're not talking about the mind as an actual separate person, but the mechanics of the mind, the way the mind is constructed, created by Krishna, gives the mind the image of a separate entity with its own desires and plans, its own nature. So the mind put on that camouflage, or how would I say that, the pretense of being friendly and harmless, with the only reason, the only purpose of lulling the sadhaka into complacency, of thinking, okay, I'm safe now. See, I'm free from lust, I'm free from anger, I'm free from all these unwanted impulses, and I can be lax. That's the word that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur uses in the commentary. I can be lax in my efforts. There is no danger anymore for me. I am liberated. Prabhupada says, I think in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, no one should feel or consider himself liberated in the presence of a beautiful lady. Of course, that requires a separate comment of what Prabhupada referred to by lady, because we don't want to create the impression that Prabhupada would put down ladies, singling them out as the sole source of dangers in life. Prabhupada elsewhere explained in a very nice way. He said, actually, when the Shastra refers to Sri Sangha as a dangerous association that creates obstacles on the path, and that's the exact words of Prabhupada, I repeat them verbatim. because he cannot say better than him. He says, for the man, woman is woman. But for the woman, man is woman. And he explained what he meant. He says, every living entity originally is feminine by nature. When we come to this material world, we put on image of different bodies, designed or defined by different genders or sexes, right? But everyone, whichever image, be it a female or a male, they wear, they want to be enjoyers, which is pumsa, which is purusha. So they want to act as in the ontological kind of existential way. They want to act as enjoyers, as males, and then turn other people, whatever gender they have, into the objects of enjoyment, which is stri, or prakriti, or female. And that's why Prabhupada came up with this maxim, for the man, woman is woman, for the woman, man is woman. And Stri Sangha applies equally to both genders, right? So, cutting back to that mind, and the mind lulls the sadhaka into complacency of thinking, I'm completely free. Nothing is dangerous for me in this world anymore because I don't have any lust left in my mind. So that's what the mind is waiting for. And when the sadhaka becomes complacent, Srila Vaishnava Thakur says, one day, lust comes back, makes a comeback, and defeats the sadhaka, makes him fall down, like that. So that devotee, going back to that book distributor, he all of a sudden felt a surge of lust, and the senses started acting as if on their own. Interesting that we can see parallels of that state of infatuation even in the lives of great devotees, but with the difference that they have the same attraction, the same spontaneous feelings towards Krishna. When Dhruva Maharaj saw the Lord in front of him, his senses came to life, and as if on their own they started running towards the Lord. The eyes wanted to see the Lord, the hands wanted to embrace him, the nostrils wanted to smell Krishna's fragrance, and the mouth, it wanted to kiss Krishna's feet. Well, Narada Muni also explains that was his experience when he saw Krishna. But that devotee was not having that kind of attraction to Krishna at that point of time. He saw those ladies, and as if without any voluntary, any deliberate decision on his own, he started crossing the path, crossing the road to get what his mind wanted him to do. And before he knew, a truck came to a screeching halt in front of him. And a friendly face stuck out of the cabin and said, Haribol! It was Jayananda Prabhu. Haribol! Let's go to the temple! Before he was able to cross the road and get to the other side, Jayananda Prabhu came to his rescue. Maybe he didn't even know what happened and how timely his arrival was, right? And the devotee was narrating that story. So Srila Prabhupada warned us of the dangers of sex life, and of course sex life takes on different forms, not just gross sex life. And what the would-be consort of Puranjana, mind personified the girl, as she's referred to here in this chapter. What she's doing here, she's putting down all other options in Puranjana's plan for life. After all, she represents intelligence, and intelligence is very logical and rational. And the Acharyas and Srila Prabhupada also explained that she uses 5 words to cut out. Interesting again that sadhus cut out our attachment to the material world, but she uses different cutting, incisive words to cut out any possibility, any chance of Puranjana avoiding her company. She says, you're not like animals, right? I'm like, excuse me, you're not like trees and plants, because trees and plants are complete. What does she say? She says, they are arati gyam. They're stupid because they don't have any concept of sex life. Now, animals have a concept of sex life, but they're acovided. They don't know how to romanticize it, how to engage in it as a way of life. For them, it's just a biological function, and they don't really invest so much time as Sometimes even Prabhupada explained in his classes that even such powerful animals who might be considered to be like a role model for some people in their romantic pursuits. I think there's even a medication for sex named after one of such animals, Vyagra. Right? Vyagra means tiger in Sanskrit. Yeah. So that's why it's called Vyagra, to make you as strong as tiger. But tigers and lions are very controlled. They engage in this biological function only once or twice a year or something. There is a specific time, a specific period for such engagements, conducive for progeny. And the Bhagavatam also said that's how cultured people should lead their sex life. What's the verse in 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? Ritau Gandur means the Grihastha should engage in sex life only when it's conducive or favorable for progeny. Not just for biological progeny, as we know from the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Kashyapa and Diti, they engaged in sex life, but the result was not so favorable. So they should also know how to, again, I'm walking into a foreign territory which I have no qualification to speak on, but anyhow we can repeat Prabhupada's words. So the offsprings could be benediction for the world, not a curse, like Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. So she says, the animals, they're, of course, they know sexual attraction, but they're accommodated, they don't know how to engage in it with relish. And then she says, Ansamparaya abhimukam, which is translated differently by the Acharyas. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Asamparaya abhimukam refers to Brahmanas and Vaishyas who can engage with expertise in sex life, but they're not heroic enough for me, unlike you. So they see the ladies, they have that kind of way of, again, no offense intended, but that's how Prabhupada and the Acharyas explain. Ladies have that natural gift to put so much meaning and so much impact in short, concise words. They can inspire a man with a few words or glances, or they can put him down, or make him do what they want him to do. Like Rukmini, she's a perfect example. When Shishupala was trying to court her, she was his infatuation, I could say. He had a crush on Rukmini, and he had that kind of guttural hatred for Krishna. So for him, getting them together, Krishna marrying Rukmini was the worst nightmare in life. So to prevent such a scenario, Shishupala wrote a letter to Rukmini. Unfortunately, I just remembered about it and I don't have the words in front of me, but Rupa Goswami does. I think Rupa Goswami in his Lalita Madhava or Vidagdha Madhava, one of those two books, he reproduces the letter written by Shishupala to Rukmini to win her heart and win her hand. And he was glorious. It was like a resume, like CV he wrote to her, saying, I'm such a great hero, I'm the son of such and such great king, I'm youthful and strong, so please marry me. So what did Rukmini do? Because she's a Kshatriya lady, and Kshatriyas are very expert and in using words to, you could say in this particular case, get under someone's skin. She didn't even write anything in response. What she did, I don't know if in South Africa it's still practiced, but teachers sometimes when they take an examination paper, they take a red pen. Do they do that? Red pen and correct mistakes. Do they do that? They did it in our childhood. So they take a red pen and they just cross things out and write in the correct answers, and then they get the mark. Was the marking system in South Africa A to F or 1 to 5? Because in Russia they used 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, was the rating system. Anyhow. And so she just took her red pen, I guess, and she corrected 5 letters in Shishupala's missive, in his letter message, and sent it back to him. And instead of, so she turned that self-glorification of Shishupal into ridicule. Because now the letter corrected by Rukmini read, I will marry only Krishna, who is much more youthful than anyone else. And he is my Lord and Master. Basically, get lost. Like that. So very painful. Or sometimes Draupadi, right? The way the Kurukshetra war started was with her laughter. When Duryodhana stumbled into that pond, strategically placed by Krishna in Brahmasthana, when that, what's the word, what is Sudharma, right? Palace was being built. The palace of the Pandavas, I forget the name of it. But Krishna, when he oversaw the construction, he told Yudhishthira Maharaj, no, here is a Brahmasthana, it's a special, very auspicious place, and nothing should be there placed in that Brahmasthana, according to Vastu. Because it's very inauspicious to have anything, it should be completely empty and free. Brahmasthana, in the center of the... And Krishna told him, well, I think it would be nice to put a kind of a water pool here. And Yudhishthira said, but no, it's very inauspicious. No, I think it's going to be fine. Just put it here. So that was Krishna's design. That was the pool that Duryodhana fell into. And then, of course, Draupadi laughed, and she said, a blind father has a blind son. And that was enough to get Duryodhana going and inflame his hatred and his vengefulness. Right? So this is what this girl, the personified intelligence, tells Puranjana Maharaj. See, you're not like the useless weaklings, Brahmanas and Vaishyas. You're a hero. And you're so great, so strong. She doesn't say it directly, but she says it in a roundabout way, which is even more powerful. Again, like Krishna, when he was coming to Dwaraka, his queens were not looking at him directly. They would cover their faces and they would look at him sideways, sidelong glances, which is much more powerful. And they would shoot with these eyes sidelong glances at Krishna compared to a pair of arrows at Krishna's heart. Like that. So, and then she says, Asvastana vidam pashum. And some kshatriyas, even though they're heroic and they're not afraid of death, but they don't know what will happen with them next life, but you do. So that's why I want to marry you, with the idea that our relationship will start this lifetime, but will continue forever after. So this is the verse, laden with innuendos and romantic advances, you could say, by that lady towards Maharaja Puranjana, and he had no chance. Of course, he married her and started enjoying, and Narada Muni explains the story to make, what's his name, the king, Prachina Barhishat, reasonable and sober. Sometimes a spiritual master has to resort to roundabout ways to explain to his materialistic disciple the proper way of spiritual life. Because if you tell him directly, her, they take offense and they may leave. So the spiritual master sometimes has that unpleasant, very difficult task to tread a very thin line in disciplining or guiding his disciple towards his spiritual life. If he were very simple and very surrendered, the spiritual master wouldn't have had to waste time. He could have just told him, surrender to Krishna, but since he's not, the spiritual master has to come up with different ways of engaging him, his mind and his inspiration, so he could come to his own conclusions, right conclusions about spiritual life. Yesterday we, at that booth, asked the sadhu, had many devotees, Maharaj, you also probably were there, right? And some people were asking very interesting questions. One lady asked a question, she had a teenage girl, and that teenage girl, the lady is a devotee, and the teenage girl, she has troubled, as many teenagers have, a troubled period of life when they really want to go out on their own and try to live as an adult or something like that. And she was asking, of course my advice is what to do. I told her, I gave her a disclaimer, I cannot really give you any practical advice, but I shared the experience of some of my godbrothers who had a very successful experience of upbringing, of rearing their children in such a way that they become devotees on their own. And sometimes the children should, at least at this stage, should be given freedom before they ask for it. Because when they start asking or demanding it, it's too late. They'll get it anyhow, but at the cost of relationship with the parents. Therefore, the parents sometimes they have to push children towards freedom before they start asking for it. Children present here, please don't quote me to your parents. It's for them to use at their discretion, right? So I told the lady that sometimes it requires the parents' patience, tolerance, and prayer for the children, so they could feel free and they could come to their own right conclusions. So this is what the spiritual master sometimes regretfully has to do. Srila Prabhupada wrote to one of his disciples, Umapati, a letter which I find to be extremely inspiring and very moving. Prabhupada writes to him, literally he says, when you left us, because him, Umapati and Kirtanananda left Srila Prabhupada for some time. Kirtananda Swami, he wanted to organize his own movement or his own center, so Umapati joined him, and Prabhupada refers to that situation, telling him, when you left me, all I could do was cry with tears in my eyes. He said, when a disciple leaves the spiritual master being influenced by Maya, the spiritual master feels it to be his obligation to deliver the disciple, but he cannot do anything because the disciple left. So what's left for the spiritual master is to cry with tears in his eyes, praying to Krishna to somehow rather make his disciple reasonable. And now you've come back, much to my delight. Thank you very much. And he says the relationship with the spiritual master, once established, never ceases, never breaks. But sometimes it becomes one-sided. The disciple thinks himself to be free, but the spiritual master thinks it to be his double responsibility to lead to success both on his own behalf as much as on the behalf of his disciple, like that. So, Srila Prabhupada, I think I would like to conclude with one quote and leave a few minutes for corrections and comments. I would like to end with the quote which I like very much, and I oftentimes quote it in my discussions with devotees about family life, because family devotees, grihastha devotees are like 95% of the population of ISKCON, if not more. And many devotees, especially those who are getting into married life, have a lot of questions as to how to lead it properly. And sometimes they have, just like yesterday, one devotee asked me, why did you decide to live as a brahmachari? And he asked me very sincerely, but I think there was a you could say, flavor of compassion on me in his question, a little bit. At least that's how I read it. And I honestly told him that I really like the freedom of association, because it gives me an opportunity to be friends with so many devotees. Not that the grihastha devotees are deprived of that opportunity, but somehow in brahmacharya life, that's the reward I get. Having maintaining friendship with peers and service to my seniors and being able to try and help in spiritual life to those who consider themselves to be junior to me, like that. So, Srila Prabhupada writes to a very famous married couple, Vaikuntha-nath and Sharadiya. And Sharadiya Mataji, she was very young when she joined the movement. She was what, about 16? Sharadiya maybe younger than that. And Prabhupada refers to her in one of his conversations in Vrindavan with his friends, Vrindavana friends, the local residents. He points at Sharadiya, apparently, because you cannot see it, but you can hear it. He points at her and says, look at that girl, see that girl? She's Sharadiya. And she came to me and she said, she's very young, she's like 18 or something. She came to me and she said, Prabhupada, I want to marry. I want to get married. And I want to marry him. And she pointed out at Vaikuntha-nath. And Prabhupada laughed and said, well, I had no choice. I had to go to Vaikuntha-nath and tell him, well, Vaikuntha, looks like you have to marry her. She's very determined. So they got married, and then they went to Guyana, which is a faraway country in Latin America. Is it Latin America somewhere? Guyana, a very remote place. And they started preaching there. Vaikuntha didn't have a second initiation, and Sharadiya did. And Prabhupada wrote in one letter to Sharadiya saying, and Vaikuntha, he wrote, well, Sharadiya, Vaikuntha has to get second initiated, but there is no one there to give him the mantra. You give him the mantra. You give him the Gayatri mantras, and you perform the fire sacrifice for him, for your husband, to make him second initiated. It's recorded, it's a document, it's Prabhupada's letter. So in this particular verse that the quote from his letter I want to read is very inspiring, which puts everything, whatever we have just read in his purport about sex life and grihastha life, in the right perspective. He says, writing to both of them, simply use this marital life for spreading the glories of Lord Krishna. Interesting, this letter was written 55 years ago exactly, in April 1971, 55 years ago. Simply use this marital life for spreading the glories of Lord Krishna, and in this very lifetime you will be promoted to associate with Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. That's the power of bhakti. Whereas karmis think that sex life is all in all, and Prabhupada explains how they abhor the orders of life in brahmachari, vanaprastha, and the sannyas. And jnanis, they fear any slight indication of sex life. That's why for jnanis and impersonalists, being a married person and being an accomplished transcendentalists are incompatible situations. But bhakti is so powerful, it can actually harness material life, marital life, and even sex life in very favorable for devotional service. So Prabhupada writes here, simply use this marital life for spreading the glories of Lord Krishna, and this very lifetime you'll be promoted to associate with Krishna in Goloka Vrindavana. And then Prabhupada explains how to do that. He says, so please stay on the purity platform. Chant 16 rounds daily and without fail. Follow all the regulative principles and read all our books, and your life is sure to be successful. That's the surest, fail-proof formula of success in spiritual life, Prabhupada says. Unless one is sufficiently empowered, he continues, one cannot preach Krishna consciousness. And if he stopped there, it would have been a very difficult kind of tall order. But then he continues, so the fact that you are preaching so nicely is proof that you are already benedicted by Krishna. So preach Krishna consciousness and be happy. Srila Prabhupada Vaikuntha Sharadiya, the 4th of April, 1971. Thank you very much. I think I'll have to stop here, and we have no time for questions or comments, even though I did try to leave time for questions, or at least comments and corrections. Ravindra Prabhu, would it be permissible to go over time by a few minutes and ask Bhakti Marg Maharaj and Pancharatna Prabhu, Mataji Atita Guna, if they have any comments, if only to correct me with a red pen. Five minutes?
Yeah, but we could take maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't know if they have any comments. Maybe it's incorrigible. Please, Maharaj, did you have your hand up? Sorry. Or Pancharatna Prabhu, sorry, I didn't notice.
Well done.
Thank you.
The Prabhupada in this purport says something that I've always, that's different from what is said in other places. In some places, sex life is discussed as, well, what's the difference between the animals and the men? It's like, there's that food from a silver plate or food from a copper plate, it's still food.
Mm-hmm.
But here, this verse seems to give a different perspective. And not only in human life compared to animals, but then we also hear that there's heavenly life. And that the impetus for karmis is that if I can reach the heavenly planets, then my karma reaches even greater heights. So there's just one interesting topic. But relative to your study of the topic, it seems that to me at least, that, and you gave the example of that devotee on Sankirtan, that, okay, this is what I wanted to say. You talked about the mind being being untrustworthy. And I was thinking about it because Krishna says, your mind can be your best friend or your worst enemy. But the perspective you gave was not that it will, if it's your friend now, that it will always be your friend. That your mind can vacillate between being friend or enemy. Therefore, it cannot be trusted one way or the other. That, I felt, was a very interesting point to reflect on. Because, and then lastly, maybe a question also from your study, is there any point in the sadhaka's life where the mind really becomes so purified that the attractions of this world disappear?
Thank you, Pancharatna Prabhu. Theoretically, yes. And practically, as they say, in theory there is no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is difference between theory and practice. So in practical terms, it remains...
Let me clarify my question, because the real question is it necessary for the jiva to reach a stage in order to be qualified to enter into pure bhakti, that the mind is no longer attracted? Like there's is it Kulik Shekhar, or who thinks, now that I have relished the pastimes of the Lord, whenever my mind thinks of, whenever the idea of sex life comes into my mind, I spit on it.
Yeah.
So, but that means that the idea is coming, and there's a reaction to it. So the question is, is there ever a point where the idea, that the mind really actually stops being attracted?
Yeah. Interesting that you remember that. I heard from Prabhupada's disciple that as a brahmachari he tried to practice that, spit, every time the mind thinks about sex, and he ran out of saliva. Or soon, very quickly. I'd like to, thank you very much, Pancharatna Prabhu, for your comment and deep question. From the traditional, you could say, orthodox point of view, yes, it is required to be completely pure. Not to pure, the mind, it cannot be purified, like the charcoal cannot be purified by water and brush. It will remain black, no matter how much we rub it. But if the same charcoal is pressurized and heated to a few thousand degrees, and then it turns into diamond, which is naturally pure and cannot be contaminated by anything, because jewels and gold and silver cannot be contaminated. It can be just cleaned, washed and used again, even for the deities, even from the most unclean place. So that's the state of, you could say, the same mind, the same carbon can be transformed into something completely different. And the transformation, I started quoting a verse from the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which says, Bhratriva imanam tadada praviryam upekshaya diditam apramattaha. The mind is mindless, It's mad mind and can't be trusted. The only thing we can do with it is consistently and deliberately ignore it. But then the verse continues with something very inspiring. It says, Guror Haresh Charana Upasana Astra Jahiv Yalikam Swayam Atmo Moshaha. You can defeat the mind or discipline it, chasten it by the weapon, like the tamers of wild animals. They have whips, and they tame tigers and lions with whips. They beat the tiger and the lion, and then they feed it for some time, and then beat again. And this way the tiger comes to accept that my pain and my pleasure are in the hands of this little human with a whip. So it says, Guror Haresh Charana Upasana Astra Jahi. You can conquer that unconquerable mind with the weapon. Astra means weapon of worship. Guror Haresh Charana Upasana, of the lotus feet of Guru and Krishna. Guror Haresh Charana, Charana means feet. Guru Hare Charana Upasana Astra, with the weapon of worship in the feet of the Lord and his pure devotee, the spiritual master, one can conquer the mind enough to qualify, to get a passing mark and go to the spiritual world. And on this point I would like to read very short excerpt from Prabhupada's letter to Krishna Das. He writes to Krishna Das on the 9th of September 72. You mentioned yet your pathway has become filled with stumbling blocks. But there are no stumbling blocks. Prabhupada says, I can kick out all those stumbling blocks immediately, provided you accept my guidance. With one stroke of my kick, I can kick out all stumbling blocks. Prabhupada writes. And then he also writes in his letter to Hayagriva, regarding your enemy, Mr. Lust, I have noticed the difficulties, but we should always remember that Krishna is stronger than any demon. And Mr. Lust, or his father, or his grandfather, nobody can do anything provided we can take shelter of Krishna very tightly. And he continues. I won't quote the entire letter, but that's the secret. From what I understand, the secret of success. I hope this is the correct answer. Thank you very much. I think we should stop here. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaura Premanande.